Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're kicking things off by looking at International Women's Day, March 8th. You know the date.
hmm
But as the article we're diving into today makes really clear, it's about much, much more than just that single day.
Exactly. This isn't just a calendar marker.
Right. We're going to explore the wider, sort of global picture of the fight for gender equality, and then really zoom in on how that story unfolds in one particular nation based on our source today.
And that source, our only source for this deep dive, is key here. We're focusing entirely on an article titled Smashing All Barriers and Reshaping Outdated Societal Perceptions.
And importantly, it's authored by Dr. Fikrejesus Amahazion.
Yes. So our mission, our goal for you listening is really specific today. We want to unpack the most important ideas and insights from this specific article by Dr. Amahazion.
We're aiming to help you get a good handle on both the big picture, the global push for gender equality, and also the specific journey and the achievements documented for Eritrea, all through the lens of this author's writing.
Think of it as getting you quickly up to speed on what this particular piece argues and presents.
Exactly. Dr. Emma article really sets the scene, doesn't it? It shows how these, well, outdated ideas get challenged and how actual barriers get broken down. We're basically using his article as our roadmap.
And it's structured quite effectively for that, I think. It gives that essential broad view first, the global context, before digging into the specifics from Eritrea.
Which lets us analyze things in detail.
Right. We can look at the progress, but also the challenges that still exist. Always remembering this is through the perspective Dr. Amahazion offers in this single article. It's a very focused look.
Okay, let's get into it. The article, as you said, uses International Women's Day, March 8th, as its starting point, its anchor.
That's the hook. And the article immediately points out this kind of dual role it plays.
Dual role. How so?
Well, on one hand, it's definitely presented as a time for celebration. Recognizing women's achievements across the board, social, economic, cultural, political, that's vital.
Celebrating the wins.
Exactly. But maybe even more critically, given the overall theme of the article, it's also framed as this really powerful, urgent call to action.
Okay, a call to action. What specific goals does the article tie to that call? What are we supposed to do?
According to Dr. Amahazion's piece, the day serves as a prompt, a catalyst, to really speed things up, accelerate progress towards full gender equality.
Right.
It's also a call, the article says, to actively promote women's empowerment more broadly, and, interestingly, to strengthen solidarity, both among women themselves and with allies around the world.
So it's not just looking back, it's very much about pushing forward.
Precisely. It's presented as this forward-looking imperative, acknowledging the journey so far, but really emphasizing how much further there is to go, based on the author's perspective.
And the article then broadens out from the day itself, framing gender equality as something really fundamental, doesn't it? Not just a social goal.
Absolutely. Dr. Amahazion is very clear on this. He presents gender equality as having this dual nature. First, it's a fundamental human right, period. Inherent, inalienable.
Just basic human rights.
Yes. But then the article adds another layer. It argues that it's also a critical, you might even say indispensable, driver of societal progress.
Okay, so a driver of progress. How?
It frames it as essential, not just for women and girls individually, but for the health, the stability, the actual advancement of whole societies.
Yeah.
It's almost positioned as a prerequisite for a society to truly flourish, according to the source.
And the article tries to ground this idea, connecting it to established international principles.
It does. It points right back to the UN Charter, 1945. Foundational stuff, highlighting that even then, the principles of equality and non-discrimination were core tenets. And then it notes how this has been reinforced over decades.
How so?
By mentioning that pretty much all major regional and international human rights treaties since then have included specific clauses prohibiting gender-based discrimination.
So the article's point is that this isn't some radical new idea. It's embedded in international law.
Exactly. It establishes this long-standing global consensus on the principle itself, according to Dr. Amahazion. It's woven into the fabric of how nations have agreed to interact, at least on paper.
But the article doesn't just stop at principles and laws. It talks about the actual demonstrable benefits, right? Citing research.
Yes, this is where it brings in the evidence, as presented by the author. It states that a lot of research from all sorts of places around the world has consistently shown positive, real-world outcomes linked to greater gender equality.
Okay, consistently shown. Like, what kind of benefits does the article specifically list?
Well, it mentions several key ones. It says gender equality actively fosters economic growth.
Right, the economy.
It's linked to real reductions in poverty and inequality, tackling those huge, persistent global problems. And beyond that, it enhances overall societal well-being, raises living standards for everyone in the community.
So the argument presented is that equality isn't just morally right, it actually makes societies function better, more prosperously.
That's the picture painted in the article, yes.
Yep.
It has these profound positive impacts on how societies work in practice.
And there's a specific focus in the article on the role of women and girls themselves in this, when they're empowered.
Very much so. The piece specifically highlights their contribution. It says empowered women and girls contribute significantly, that's the word used, to the health, prosperity, security, and stability of their communities.
Because it's not just about individuals succeeding, it's about lifting the whole community.
Exactly. The article frames their empowerment as this vital force for collective advancement. And importantly, it sets the stage for a more promising future for everyone involved. Their participation is presented as a key engine for progress.
Okay, so we have the fundamental principle, the international backing, the proven benefits. But the article doesn't just paint a rosy picture of the global situation, does it? It offers a reality check.
A crucial one, yes.
Hmm.
While Dr. Amahazion acknowledges, the real progress that has been made in many places, the article makes a very strong counterpoint. It emphasizes that millions of women worldwide still face discrimination, violence, and deep-seated systemic inequality every single day.
So despite the progress, the problem is still massive and widespread.
That's presented as a persistent reality and a key takeaway from this global overview section in Dr. Amahazion's writing.
Which leads to the conclusion that the fight is far from over.
Exactly. The author explicitly states that the fight for full gender equality is far from over.
Right.
And therefore, according to the article, it has to remain an urgent priority. It needs sustained commitment, real effort, and concrete actions globally.
So the global picture from Dr. Amahazion is one of recognizing achievements but facing this stark, ongoing reality that demands way more work.
That's the backdrop he establishes.
Yeah.
It sets the stage perfectly before the article zooms in on the specific case study of Eritrea.
Okay, let's make that shift then. The article moves from the global view to Eritrea's specific story, and the starting point it describes, well, it sounds pretty bleak.
Yes, the author makes it very clear. Historically, Eritrean society, like many others, it should be said, systemically marginalized women.
How so? What was the perception?
The prevailing view, as Dr. Amahazion describes it, was often that women were inherently inferior, incapable of making, meaningful contributions outside of very traditional domestic roles.
And the article uses that specific, very harsh traditional saying to illustrate this mindset, doesn't it?
It does, and it's quite shocking. It's included, I think, to show the depth of the perception that needed changing. The saying quoted is, "Just as there is no donkey with horns, there is no woman with brains."
Wow. That's incredibly dismissive.
It really is. And thinking about what that reveals, as the article implies we should, it shows a belief system that just fundamentally denied women intellectual capacity, and therefore deny their potential in any field needing intellect or leadership. It's a powerful, painful example of the historical mindset presented by the author.
A huge barrier to overcome. But the article argues that there was a major shift away from this, a turning point.
Yes, a pivotal one, linked directly to the nation's history. Dr. Amahazion writes that since its unparalleled independence struggle, which was incredibly long and involved, Eritrea made a conscious choice. Gender equality became a national priority.
So the fight for national liberation and the fight for gender equality became intertwined, according to the source.
That's the framing presented. The author connects the successful struggle for self-determination directly with this internal commitment to gender equality.
And who does the article credit with driving this change? Which groups were key?
It identifies two main actors: the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, the EPLF, which led the independence fight,
Okay.
and the National Union of Eritrean Women, the NUW. The article specifically highlights the NUW's crucial, indispensable role in pushing the whole national struggle forward.
On both fronts, independence and women's rights.
That's the implication in the text, that the NUEW was vital not just for independence, but also for championing gender equality from within the movement itself. It suggests This commitment wasn't just tacked on later. It was part of the liberation process, according to Dr. Amahazion.
Okay, so we have this historical context of marginalization summed up by that awful saying, and then this fundamental shift driven by the EPLF and NUEW during the independence struggle. The next obvious question the article tackles is, how did this new priority translate into action? What frameworks were built?
Exactly. The article moves into the practical steps taken after formal independence. The first move described is engaging internationally.
Aligning with global standards on human rights.
Precisely. The article lists several key international treaties. Eritrea ratified shortly after independence. You have the big ones: the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights.
Covering a broad range of rights.
Yes. And then critically, the article highlights the ratification of CEDAW, the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women.
And the article explains why CEDAW is so important.
It does. It describes it as the landmark treaty setting international standards specifically for ending gender discrimination. Ratifying it is presented by Dr. Amahazion as Eritrea deliberately plugging itself into these global norms right after independence. A formal commitment on the world stage.
And it wasn't just signing documents, right? The article mentions active participation in global forums.
That's another point the author makes. Active participation in leading global initiatives. It mentions the big Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing that was huge in the 90s.
I remember that.
And also engagement with the UN Commission on the Status of Women, the CSW. The article calls these forums key catalysts for advancing women's rights globally.
So the participation is framed as actively pushing the agenda forward, not just showing up.
That's the impression given by the author, yes. An active engagement on the international stage.
Okay, so international alignment was one piece. Then the article looks internally at the domestic front, as it calls it.
Rifting focus inward. Dr. Amahazion describes how Eritrea systematically set up its own institutional and policy frameworks to promote gender equality.
With a specific focus.
Yes, the author notes a particular focus on addressing the needs of historically marginalized and vulnerable women within the country, targeting those who face the biggest disadvantages.
And a key document mentioned here is the National Charter from 1994.
Yes, that's highlighted as foundational. The article describes it as the document laying out the nation's guiding vision, its core principles, its aspirations.
And it contains something specific about gender equality.
Something very powerful, which Dr. Amahazion quotes directly and emphasizes.
What does it say?
The Charter declares, "A society that does not respect the rights and equality of women cannot be truly liberated."
Wow! Cannot be truly liberated. That ties it directly to the independence struggle again.
Absolutely. It's embedded right there in the nation's foundational vision. It's not presented as secondary. It fundamentally links national liberation to gender equality. The article implies that, for Eritrea, being truly free as a nation requires ensuring women's rights and equality. It elevates it to a defining characteristic.
That's a remarkably strong statement for a national charter. Does the article mention the legal system's role in this domestic framework?
It briefly notes that the legal system aims for fair and equal participation, specifically mentioning women's access to community courts.
So practical access to justice at the local level.
Exactly. It's presented as another component, ensuring these principles translate into practice for ordinary people. So you see this layered approach described: international commitments, core national principles in the Charter, and practical legal access.
Okay, so framework's established, but principles need action. The article then moves into the specific initiatives and support systems put in place, right?
Yes, moving from framework to function. Dr. Amahazion highlights the deliberate use of affirmative action policies.
Affirmative action. In which areas?
The article mentions key sectors: education, employment, and public life. These weren't just abstract ideas, they were actively implemented.
And the goal, according to the article?
Explicitly stated, to address historical inequalities. The understanding presented is that just declaring equality isn't enough. You need proactive measures to level the playing field, create opportunities, dismantle old barriers.
Does the article say these policies had an effect?
Yes, it claims they resulted in a significant increase in women's social, economic, and political participation. They're presented by the author as having a real, tangible impact on women's presence and engagement across society.
Beyond affirmative action, the article lists specific laws guaranteeing rights and protections.
It does. It details several key legal guarantees codified in national law. Things like equal access to land, crucial economically,
Hmm.
equal citizenship rights, explicit legal protection against gender-based violence, acknowledging it as a specific issue, and, importantly, protection against harmful traditional practices.
So tackling harmful customs through law.
Yes, and the author's point is that these laws, working alongside affirmative action, are driving real change and improving lives. It's described as this combination of boosting participation and legally protecting fundamental rights.
And what about support structures? The article mentions specific organizations providing help on the ground.
It does. It names the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, showing governmental involvement, and it brings up the National Union of Eritrean Women, NUEW, again, highlighting its ongoing critical role.
Alongside another group.
Yes, the Eritrean Women's Agribusiness Association is also mentioned as crucial.
And what kind of work are these groups highlighted for doing, according to the article?
The article points to their impact in areas like economic empowerment, helping women get access to finance, for instance, also education and training, and significantly, advocacy work, especially campaigning against gender-based violence.
So it paints a picture of government and key civil society groups working together.
That's the portrayal in this section of the source, yes. A comprehensive support system aimed at practical empowerment, skill building, and tackling specific challenges like violence.
It sounds like the article is describing a really comprehensive effort, and it suggests this work got noticed internationally.
That's a clear point Dr. Amahazion makes later in the piece. He explicitly states that Eritrea's efforts and achievements has not gone unrecognized internationally.
How so? What evidence does the article offer for that recognition?
It mentions Eritrean delegations sharing their progress at major international forums, citing the CSW, the UN Commission on the Status of Women, again as one menu.
Okay.
It also notes praise from international organizations, specifically naming the UN Population Fund, UNFPA, for commending Eritrea's significant achievements.
So recognition from UN bodies.
Yes, and there's a very specific recent example given to really anchor this point.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
The article details an event in Asmara, the capital, that happened just months ago relative to the article's writing. It involved government officials, the NUEW, other institutions.
A stakeholder meeting.
Seems like it. And during this event, Nala Valji, the UN resident coordinator in Eritrea, the top UN person there, apparently gave remarks.
And she commented on this.
According to the article, yes. Mrs. Valji specifically commended Eritrea for its efforts and progress on gender equality. The author uses this as concrete, high-level, recent evidence of external acknowledgement. It suggests the progress described isn't just an internal narrative, but has been noted positively by the international community present in the country.
Okay, so we've gone from global principles to Eritrea's history, the shift in priority, the frameworks, the initiatives, and now international recognition. Where does the article go next?
The final major section really shifts focus to the tangible progress, the actual visible contributions Eritrean women are making to building the nation.
So moving beyond policy to the real-world impact.
Exactly. The article emphasizes this as beyond policy initiatives. It's about showing the results, the women actively participating and contributing across different sectors.
What kind of examples does Dr. Amahazion provide? Which sectors?
He gives several concrete examples. In healthcare, for instance,
Okay.
the article states women are doctors, nurses, and, importantly, community health workers right at the forefront of delivering care. It credits their work as crucial to many of Eritrea's health-related successes, a direct link to positive public health outcomes.
And education. You mentioned that earlier, too.
Yes, the article comes back to it strongly here. It says women and girls continue to excel, and it explicitly connects this, as we noted, to disproving those old, deeply damaging stereotypes about women's intellect.
How does it back that up?
With specifics, females make up a significant portion of school enrollments nationwide, showing access. And they consistently rank among the top academic performers. So the article presents their achievement as actively dismantling those past perceptions through demonstrated capability.
That's a powerful dynamic. What about fields usually seen as male-dominated? Does the article address that?
It makes a point of it, yes, highlighting women making strides in areas like agriculture, engineering, and mining.
Doing what kind of roles?
The article mentions various technical, managerial, and administrative positions within these key economic sectors. It suggests the progress is broad, not just confined to certain fields.
Interesting. What about sports?
Also mentioned, Eritrean female athletes are described as breaking barriers, particularly in athletics and cycling.
Achieving success.
Yes, the article notes they've gained international recognition. And importantly, it says their success challenges societal norms that once discouraged women's participation in sports. So, progress on the cultural front, too.
And finally, national defense is mentioned.
Yes, quite significantly. Dr. Amahazion emphasizes the essential role women play and have played in defending the nation.
Connecting it to the past.
Directly. It links today's women in defense to their foremothers who fought for independence, a legacy of contribution. The article states that today's Eritrean women stand firm in safeguarding national security, highlighting their ongoing integral role.
So this whole section seems designed to show women aren't just beneficiaries of policy, but active builders of the nation across every sphere: health, education, economy, sports, defense.
That definitely seems to be the core argument Dr. Amahazion's building in this part of the article, moving from the how of policy to the what of tangible, indispensable contributions, based on his examples.
And then, towards the very end, the article uses that striking metaphor to tie it all together.
It does. A very memorable one. Dr. Amahazion compares Eritrea to a bird and states that without its women and girls, the nation would be like a bird without wings.
A bird without wings. What's the deeper meaning there, according to the article's context?
It powerfully emphasizes just how essential, how vital women's contributions are seen to be for the nation's potential. A wingless bird can't fly, can't reach its heights, can't navigate properly.
Right.
The article implies, through this image, that Eritrea similarly needs the full, active, empowered participation of its women to truly progress, to function effectively, to achieve its potential. It frames women as fundamental co-creators of the nation's flight path, not just passengers.
That's a strong image. And following that, the article offers a kind of summary of the journey over the last few decades.
Yes, it recaps the main themes. It describes the past 30 years for Eritrean women as making remarkable strides, explicitly smashing all barriers and reshaping societal perceptions, echoing the title.
Pulling it all together.
Exactly. Highlighting women's agency, their resilience, and their absolutely indispensable role in national progress, as presented throughout the piece.
And it finishes with a look to the future.
It does. Dr. Amahazion's concluding point connects the ongoing commitment to gender equality directly to Eritrea's future prospects. The article concludes that by continuing to promote equality and empower women, Eritrea will pave the way for a more inclusive and prosperous future. So gender equality isn't just an end goal. It's framed as a core strategy for national success and well-being going forward, a future built on the strength of all its people.
Okay. So we've traced the path laid out in Dr. Fikrejesus Amahazion's article, Smashing All Barriers and Reshaping Outdated Societal Perceptions. We started with the global context he provided, then shifted to Eritrea's specific history of marginalization, the critical turning point linked to independence, the frameworks, legal, policy, institutional, that were set up.
Then the concrete initiatives, the support structures, the international recognition the article mentions, and those really tangible contributions across so many sectors: healthcare, education, even mining and defense.
Right. And finally, landing on that powerful wings of the nation metaphor and the forward-looking vision, all drawn specifically and only from the insights within this single article by Dr. Amahazion.
It's been a deep dive into one author's perspective, absolutely. Dr. Amahazion lays out this narrative arc, from historical challenges to a declared national priority, backed by structures, actions, and, according to him, demonstrable results acknowledged internationally.
So as you listening reflect on all this information drawn from Dr. Amahazion's piece, here's something to chew on, a final thought stemming directly from the core ideas presented in the source. Think back to that really powerful declaration quoted from Eritrea's national charter. A society that does not respect the rights and equality of women cannot be truly liberated. If we take that connection seriously, the link between women's equality and true liberation within one nation's foundational vision, what might that imply for how we understand liberation more broadly on a global scale? What does that suggest is necessary for any society, anywhere, to genuinely consider itself free or liberated, based on the logic presented in the article?
Or, building on that other powerful image from Dr. Amahazion, women as the essential wings of a nation, needed for flight, for progress. What does it really take, practically speaking, for any society to move beyond just acknowledging those wings exist and actually create the conditions, the environment, the support structures that genuinely enable the full unhindered flight of all its members? Something to consider, drawing from the specific arguments and metaphors used in this article.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Dr. Fikrejesus Amahazion's article. We hope exploring this specific source has been valuable for you. Maybe think about which points or examples really stood out from this analysis.
Until our next deep dive.